Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Let's Keep Moving with the APDA. My name is Teresa Baker, and I am one of the physical therapists at Boston University Center for Neurorehabilitation. And our topic for today is innovative technology for freezing of gait. And we'll be so pleased to be joined by Dr. Franchino Porciuncula, who's going to share some of this exciting new information with us. So by further way of introduction, this is our team here at Boston University Center for Neurorehabilitation and the APDA Rehab Resource and Referral Center. This is some of our contact information. If you'd love to get in touch with us, we would love that. Some of you who may have joined us in the past know that we present these webinars as general information and not specific medical advice. So we ask that you do please consult your individual physical therapist or physician for some recommendations that might be right for you. The other thing I'd like to mention is that we have done some past webinars related to freezing of gait, and that's always a topic that we get a number of questions about. So if you haven't had a chance to watch some of our past episodes, you can go to our Let's Keep Moving YouTube channel and view some of our past episodes specifically related to this topic, freezing of gait. Okay, so on to our topic for today. Freezing of gait is something that not everyone with Parkinson's experiences, but it can become a little more prevalent the longer someone is dealing with Parkinson's. People who experience freezing are at greater risk of falling, and they often report more difficulty with their everyday mobility and often more difficulty with quality of life. So what do we mean by freezing of gait? It's often defined by that kind of definition or that sense of a transient feeling that the feet are glued to the floor. Sometimes it can present very situational difficulties, specifically difficulty with initiation of walking, difficulty with turning, walking through narrowed spaces or in crowded spaces. Sometimes it can be accompanied with trembling of the legs or these smaller, more shuffling style steps. And I think it might be helpful to show an example of what we mean by freezing of gait. So we have kind of a short video example. And in particular, freezing of gait, again, does not happen for everyone, does not happen in all circumstances, but these are some situations that might be typical. Here you can see a person who's trying to make it through a doorway, which is a narrowed environment. And you can see that as this person's trying to move, the steps are not coming as fluidly. They're a little shorter, smaller. This next example is showing a freeze related to a turn. So the person's walking to this tape line on the floor and is trying to make a turn. And you can see that it's hard to get the steps to come fluidly. It's hard to make a step into that turn. A person eventually gets through the turn, but it takes over 10 seconds to do it. Now, not all freezing takes that same level of duration. So this is a short example of a very short freeze. So this person's also trying to turn, but you can see there a little bit of that hesitation, shorter step, but the person does make it through the turn. And this is kind of another example of a initiation. So taking that first step where this person's experiencing a freezing in that particular situation, but eventually is able to take a step and make that walking transition. So it kind of brings us to ask a question, well, in that sense, what is going on with the walking in the freezing of gait? And maybe I could just show kind of in this example, by way of very general explanation. In this figure here, you see sort of the A column going from top to bottom on the slide and the B column. And what I just want to bring attention to is that when it comes to control of movement, there is sort of attentional control pathways in the brain that take someone's cognitive attention to kind of generate the movement. And then there's more automatic control processes in the brain. And the figure's just showing them kind of side by side. For people with Parkinson's, the automatic control pathways can be more interrupted. So for something that is typically very automatic, such as walking, that can require a person with Parkinson's to bring more attention to get the same movement output compared to, say, someone that doesn't have Parkinson's disease. And that is what we tap into a little bit with our current state of treatment for freezing of gait. So that brings me just a very brief overview. With our current treatment approaches to freezing of gait, they involve a number of different approaches, some related to rehab and cueing or coaching, some related to medication, and then some related to procedures for some people, such as deep brain stimulation. But for the most part, our current treatment approaches for the management of freezing of gait intervene once freezing has already happened, and often require a lot of cognitive attention to focus on the strategy to kind of work through the freeze. And that's what makes this topic for today, this newer innovation, particularly exciting. And so our special guest for today is Dr. Franchino Porciuncula, who is a research assistant professor at Boston University and the co-lead author of an article that was recently published in the journal Nature Medicine. And we are so excited to welcome him today as a special guest to give us more information about this new work. So I'd love to introduce Franchino, welcome you to the broadcast today. It's so nice to see you.
Hi, Teresa. Thank you for the introduction, and thanks for inviting me to this series. I'm really looking forward to sharing our study with the APDA community. So I'm part of a research team here at BU and Harvard comprised of physical therapists, engineers, and movement scientists. And this team is led by Professors Terry Ellis and Connor Walsh. And we're all interested in developing innovative solutions to address this challenging problem of freezing of gait in Parkinson's. So we developed this soft robotic apparel that's designed to prevent freezing of gait in Parkinson's disease. And we've published this article recently in Nature Medicine, and this is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. So freezing of gait is complex. Multiple reasons can explain freezing of gait, and our overall understanding is still not very clear. But by studying how people walk, this kind of like gives us some targets, some objectives on how we're going to be addressing this problem. So here I have a schematic of footsteps of a person who's walking with Parkinson's disease and someone who doesn't have Parkinson's disease. And what's notable for walking in people with Parkinson's disease is this irregularity in steps. What I mean by irregularity in steps is that one step to the next is kind of like not the same, and it fluctuates over time. And if you compare it to footsteps of a person who doesn't have Parkinson's on the schematic above, we see that it's regular and they're longer. In Parkinson's, there are shorter steps and there is this irregularity. And it's believed that this combination of irregular steps and short strides, when combined, when the problem becomes so much that the person is unable to handle it, it results in a freezing episode. In addition, when we compare walking patterns between people with Parkinson's, freezers versus non-freezers, there's also a difference in their walking mechanics. In those who experience freezing, there's a reduction in hip motion. So knowing that these movement impairments can be addressed by robotics, as has been explored in other neurological conditions, such as in stroke and cerebral palsy and spinal cord injury. But work on Parkinson's, addressing specifically freezing of gait, we basically didn't know what the potential was. So what our team at BU and Harvard developed was a soft robotic apparel that essentially assists hip motion during walking. This robotic apparel is comprised of textile-based components, so cloth materials, a pair of motors, and some electronics. So the textile components are worn on the waist, and a strap on each thigh, allowing for the rope which connects the motor to these textile components to assist the person while they're walking. So when the motor pulls and releases onto the rope, it essentially allows the person to get that assistance from the robotic apparel. And then the graph that I'm going to be showing in the middle here is essentially just showing how customizable the system is. We can vary the amount of assistance that the robotic apparel is providing, and also the timing, knowing that each person's walking pattern is different from another. So basically tailoring the assistance to each person. So how does the robotic apparel work? I'm going to be showing here a video of our participant who participated in the study, two videos comparing. The top here, the person's not wearing the robotic apparel, and on the bottom, he is wearing it and being assisted by the robotic apparel. So what's notable here is when being assisted by the robotic apparel, we see longer strides, more regular rhythm in their walking, generally more upright in posture, and we see an observable arm swing. Arm swing is part of walking. So we see these changes, and ultimately no freezing of gait when the system is assisting the person, in contrast to pronounced freezing episodes and just disruptive freezing episodes when not being assisted. So what we did to be able to examine the effect of this robotic apparel is we performed a test, which is called a 2-minute walk test. It's very similar to the 6-minute walk test, which many of you may perhaps be familiar with in physical therapy. This is just 2 minutes of walking. We ask the participant to walk or to cover as much distance as they can in 2 minutes, and essentially measured the times when the person was in a freezing episode, and then also measure the overall distance. So again, improvements in gait quality we're seeing here when being assisted. Longer strides, regular rhythm, more upright, more confident with their walking and arm swing, in contrast to when not being assisted. There is this pronounced, difficulty in walking and multiple freezing episodes. Ultimately, when our participant was wearing the robotic apparel, there was no freezing episode. And this is shown on the graph on the right side of your screen. The top panel here just shows the amount of time spent freezing. The red graph, the red bar depicts wearing the robotic apparel, meaning and showing that there was no freezing episode at all, compared to multiple and substantial freezing episodes when being assisted. And then the graph on the bottom just shows the distance covered, showing that there's a substantial distance covered when being assisted by the robotic apparel. Now, we performed multiple tests over 5 sessions over a span of 6 months to ensure that what we're seeing is not just by chance, making sure that we didn't just get the participant on a good day. We also know that freezing of gait can be triggered by certain conditions like multitasking or dual tasking. So we added those conditions in. And we also tested under medication on and medication off. So what we're showing here for the top panel, panel A, regardless of what condition it was, when the participant was wearing the robotic apparel, there was no freezing of gait, virtually no freezing of gait throughout these tests. In comparison to when not being assisted, we see substantial and multiple episodes of freezing of gait. The bottom panel shows the corresponding distance traveled. If you look at the rightmost panel, that's a summary, that's the average across days. When not wearing the robotic apparel, there's about 40% of the time was spent freezing versus no freezing of gait when being assisted. And this also corresponded with an improvement up to 50 meters in distance traveled. So really promising results. Another experiment that we did to further examine the robustness of the effects of the robotic apparel is by looking how immediate the effects are. So we basically toggled the power on and off and examined what the effects are when being assisted, and then compare it immediately right after when we turn off the assistance. Here, the assistance has been turned off, and we see a dramatic reversion back to the person's walking where there's substantial freezing episodes. And then I'll just let it play for a little bit until until the power turns on, just for you to be able to see the difference between power on and power off. And then here, the assistance is being turned on. And then we want to see again these dramatic changes, improvements in walking quality, and again, the elimination of freezing of gait. So really promising. So how does the robotic apparel actually work? So we measured movement in different ways through sensors, through 3D motion capture in our laboratories. What we found is that when the person's wearing the robotic apparel, we see an improvement in hip motion, which makes sense because we are really assisting hip movement to facilitate that advancement of the leg forward. And as a result, we see bigger steps, and also there's improved rhythmicity or regularity of stepping. And this we think are benefits that harness this prevention of freezing of gait. In this study, while it's promising, there are several limitations. And I think the two main things, this is work on a single person. While single subject studies are critical in allowing us to understand new possibilities in interventions, it's also critical for us to understand how this is going to apply to more people, with perhaps with different, walking presentations, different, challenges that they're experiencing. And we're in the early stages of doing a study examining the effects on more people with freezing of gait. Another limitation of this study is that it focused on straight ahead walking. At the time of development of this robotic apparel, it was not optimized for turning, and stand to walk. Turning in particular is a challenging, it's a common trigger for freezing of gait, and the system back then was not optimized for turning. We have ongoing efforts in developing controllers that would allow the robotic apparel to assist during turning, and this is going to be part of our investigation. So to summarize, our study has demonstrated that the use of relatively low to moderate amounts of forces were sufficient to prevent freezing of gait. And the implication of this is that if we don't need high forces, then we can keep the system to be low profile. And if it's low profile, perhaps it'll be much more usable on a daily basis, because that's our vision, for it to be used in daily life. The second point here is the robotic. This is unique to the robotic apparel. It does not rely on detecting freezing episodes. Freezing episodes are hard to detect, and this is what other systems or other approaches tend to kind of use to prevent freezing or to manage freezing of gait. This system does not rely on that. It provides continuous gait enhancing benefits. And the last and final point here is that the robotic apparel provided immediate, repeatable, and clinically meaningful outcomes that improved walking quality and in preventing freezing of gait. And this we think is really promising. But then again, early preliminaries findings, and our next step here is to examine this in more people under different contexts of freezing of gait. And with that, I'd like to invite back my colleague, Teresa, for some discussion and some Q&A.
Franchino, thank you so much. That is so fascinating. And I know the audience is likely to have questions too. So I'll just, for anyone who's here in the audience, if you have any questions for Franchino, would you write it in the chat? And we can kind of open up the discussion. But Franchino, I have some questions myself that I know we've heard, and I can maybe think what might be going through people's minds. So that the robotic apparel, it's just wonderful what you showed. My question is it commercially available? And if not, what do you sort of see sort of in the future for that?
Yeah, great question, Teresa. We get this question a lot. There's lots of interest, with wanting to get, people wanting to get their hands on the robotic apparel, given that it's so promising. But the answer is that we're still in the early stages of testing. I think having a better understanding of how this is going to work with, different types of presentation is an important, stage before we commercialize. It really depends on the results of these studies. That's going to determine how we're going to be moving forward. But definitely, we want this device to be commercialized. We want this device to be out of the lab and in people's homes, in clinics, for clinicians and patients to be using. But I would say we are still in the early stages of testing. But I think maybe you would agree, everyone is just very dedicated in making sure that we succeed in these next steps to really allow this technology to be commercialized.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, the results are so promising yet very early. And
Yes.
so we know that we need more investigation. Another question that I've heard from some people, and I can almost hear it running through people's minds, that they're working on their exercise program, they're working in physical therapy to try to manage their freezing of gait. How is this robotic apparel different from those style exercises?
Yeah, great question, Teresa. I think the main, the unique thing about the robotic apparel is that it does not rely on thinking, right? So most of the exercise approaches or most of the cueing strategies that we use in therapy, they're great for many reasons. However, it still relies on that attentional network that you have described. It's doable, but it's fatiguing, it's tiring, and sustaining that for a long time is less tenable for many people. So the unique thing about the robotic apparel, it does not depend on one's thinking. It automates that, and it makes it easier. And if it is easier, maybe it's going to save energy, allowing the person to do other things. Maybe think of other things, or save energy for other activities in a day.
Very much. Yes. Yes. And I recognize that as we're working with people in the clinic, they're working very hard mentally, cognitively to use some of these strategies that that help them in everyday life. And it takes a lot of attention, for sure. Yeah. And Franchino, I think you touched on this as well, but I think I just ask it again. For the robotic apparel, someone's wearing it, and I could see it's over clothes. It's so the person's wearing it. But how long do those effects last when someone's wearing the robotic apparel?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Well, based on this experiment that I've shown on intermittent assistance, this is when we were toggling the assistance on and off. It seems like there's an immediate, benefit when the system's on, but it reverts back to kind of like the baseline, walking abilities of the person. So at least in the short term, these effects are kind of like in the moment, and the way we're kind of like envisioning this device is more of like an assistive aid. However, that being said, if this device is going to enable someone who is severely limited by their freezing, if this device is going to allow someone to engage in more physical activity, more walking, we know that walking intensity and volume is important in the long-term management of Parkinson. If this is what's going to allow that, perhaps there would be more than just short-term, benefits to using it.
That's right. That's right. Yes. And I know that'll be so interesting as more and more study goes on. And just to kind of clarify for the audience, or if I know people might be thinking this in their mind, Franchino, would you describe the robotic apparel? Does it stimulate the muscles to help the walking, or could you kind of share with us again the mechanism of how it works?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get this question quite frequently. It doesn't stimulate the muscle. It's not like a stimulator. It provides mechanical assistance. So basically, there's a cable similar to a bike cable. When that gets pulled by the motor, it basically just tugs onto the limb, and then that's enough for the robot to assist the leg in moving forward. So it's mechanical. And I think there are advantages in using a mechanical assistance. It's perhaps a lot easier to wear. You won't have to deal with pads, and the overall effect on the muscle, perhaps it's less fatiguing as opposed to electrical stimulation.
That's right. We've had some excellent questions from the audience, and we appreciate and just ask everyone to keep them coming. We had an interesting question from Kristen. Kristen says, how much does the device weigh?
Yeah, great question. So it's relatively light compared to, I haven't shown pictures of other robotic systems, but it's 2.3 kilograms. And most of the weight is kind of like focused around the waist, which makes it a lot easier to carry. Other systems are rigid and they're heavy and they cover the whole leg. So this is really low profile. And from our experience with our participants, weight has not been an issue. So that's really promising.
Yeah, that's exciting. And then another kind of a very important but a very practical question. Judy asks, how do you turn it on and off? How does it stop and start?
Great question. Now the sensors, there are integrated sensors in the system, and these sensors basically inform the robotic apparel on how it's going to adjust to the person's walking. So if someone's walking faster, slower, or stopping and starting, the robotic apparel automates that and provides assistance in the moment. So that, yeah, everything is automated.
Which goes back to your earlier point about there's not so much cognitive attention
Yes.
necessary to use this device.
Mhm.
Yes, yes. And I know in some of the chat, we've gotten some questions, and we've kind of heard this a little before about question, is this research only taking place in the Boston area? And I might answer that one. Yes, for right now, this research is taking place sort of in the Boston area. But what we're hoping to do is perhaps open up some even questionnaires or surveys to people, say, different areas across the country to get more input as to how a device like this might be helpful, what people are kind of challenged with in their walking. So I'm hopeful that there may be other ways people in different areas of the country could even contribute to some of the questions that these research devices are posing. And I also know that people can connect with us here at Boston University via our exercise helpline. We have our rehab@bu.edu and our phone number there as well. And that also may help provide some further information for people who are curious about this kind of style of device. But the actual testing right now is going on in the Boston area. Yes, yes. Well, Franchino, I think this presentation has brought to light so much hope and that technology is out there. Yes, there's a long way to go, but people are working together to try to solve some of these challenges and make this technology, as you mentioned, usable for people and get it out of the lab eventually.
That is the goal, Teresa.
Yeah. Franchino, I want to thank you so much for bringing this information to all of us here, providing some of the video, the figures. I think you just did such a wonderful job describing what's going on, and we are excited to keep following this work. So I want to thank you so much, Franchino.
Thank you so much, Teresa. It's been a pleasure, and it's such an opportunity to share with the APDA community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then to everyone here in the audience, I want to thank you for your continued support of the Let's Keep Moving series, for staying with us, for your questions. This topic of freezing of gait is something that we get questions about all the time, and that we work with people here in our clinic. So we know it's on everyone's mind across the country. We'd love to have you join us in June for our next Let's Keep Moving series, where we're going to continue to talk about freezing of gait. And Tim is going to lead that discussion with more of practical, everyday tips and strategies to manage freezing of gait. So we'd love to have you join for that. And then what we'd also love to do is have everyone connect with the APDA virtual events calendar, which covers virtual events and then sometimes events that are taking place locally in everyone's area. But most importantly, thank you again to Dr. Franchino Porciuncula. Thank you to the audience. And we really look forward to seeing you again on the next Let's Keep Moving. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Chambers, President and CEO of the American Parkinson Disease Association. Thank you so much for joining us today on our program. Every day, APDA is committed to providing helpful programs just like this one, as well as a wide variety of support groups, exercise classes, and educational programs to support the Parkinson's disease community. Whether online or in person, APDA is here for you every step of the way. You can find all of our upcoming virtual events on our website at apdaparkinson.org/events. We keep you posted on our social media channels as well, so make sure you follow us there. You can also connect to local resources and events through our nationwide network of chapters and information and referral centers. Remember, we're just a click or a phone call away. If you've enjoyed today's broadcast, I hope you will consider making a donation to help keep programs like this possible. Every gift, large or small, helps APDA support people living with PD through thoughtful programming, reliable resources, groundbreaking research, and more. Please visit apdaparkinson.org/donate today to support our critical work for those with Parkinson's. We are so grateful for your generosity. Thank you.